And so when they are crying, you have to remember they're trying to communicate that something is not right, that they are trying to share with you, hey, I actually have the cheat code, but I can't translate it into English or whatever your native language is.
Welcome to the Be Well Baby podcast. I'm Dr. Emily Spaeth. I'm the founder of Be Well Baby here in Portland, Oregon, and the creator of the Beyond Birth Blueprint, where we support families all over the world. This podcast exists because pregnancy, birth, and postpartum care in this country are fragmented, rushed, and often missing the whole picture. And I believe families deserve better. Here, we talk about bodies, babies, nervous systems, feeding, recovery, and real life through a grounded, trauma-informed lens. Today, I'm talking with Camilla Rae, a postpartum doula and sleep specialist who has supported over 1,800 families. That is a lot. She's had a long career. And I have to tell you, this conversation really helped to reframe how I think about newborn sleep. Camilla brings this beautiful combination of science and spirituality to her work. We are talking about everything from vagal nerve stimulation to babies becoming embodied in their physical forms. She walks us through exactly what to do during each of your baby's wake windows to help your baby sleep better. And it's actually different in each wake window. She'll also talk about why sleep regressions are actually progressions, which is something that I love to say in my practice all the time because babies are not regressing. They're learning a new skill. And she talks about how to approach sleep training in a way that doesn't leave you feeling guilty or your baby feeling abandoned. And at the end, we talk about something I wasn't expecting. Camilla's incredible work collecting placentas for search and rescue dog training and how that program came full circle for her in the most profound way. She's vulnerable, and I'm so honored to be able to share this conversation with you. Whether you're pregnant and trying to prepare for a potential lack of sleep, deep in the trenches of sleep deprivation, or wondering if sleep training is right for your family, this episode is for you. And just a quick loving note before we dive in, everything you hear on this podcast is for educational and informational purposes only. It's not medical advice. It's not a substitute for care from your own team. Every body and every baby and every season is different, and you deserve support that is personalized to you. If something feels concerning or urgent, please reach out to your healthcare team right away. All right, let's get into today's episode. So, Camilla, I would love to start with, I know that you have supported over 1,800 families. That's almost 2,000 families.
Yeah,
That's a lot.
it's a lot.
So what is the most common misconception about newborn sleep that you find yourself correcting for families?
Yeah. I think that there are two things that I kind of am always talking about and educating around. And the first one is that babies need to learn how to sleep. They need to learn how to do this really biological thing. And the thing that I find is that when I work with people prenatally, I can do a lot of this education, which is, as we get to 36, 37, 38 weeks of pregnancy, like how often are you, the gestational person, waking up in the night? Like noticing when you're waking up and tuning into the fact that your baby is attuning you to the natural rhythm that they're going to be coming into for nursing, if that's how you choose to feed your baby. And if you were to, instead of getting up to go to the bathroom, readjusting, coming back to bed, maybe getting yourself a snack and sitting there and scrolling because now you're like wired. And you were just to say instead, like, I'm going to take 20 minutes to just breathe and relax and then allow myself to kind of fall back into sleep naturally, without trying to, hem and haw and get upset about like, oh, I'm up again. Oh, I had to go to the bathroom again. Then you are prepping yourself for that pattern of like what it's going to be like to go in towards sleep deprivation is. And so when I get a hold of people early on in the like gestational period, we talk a lot about this. And once their baby gets here, we liken it back to, okay, remember you were waking up at 9 o'clock anyway. You were already waking up at midnight. You were already up at 3 a.m. And
Mm-hmm.
when they kind of start to make some of those prenatal to postpartum connections, they actually feel better about sleep and how
Interesting.
much disrupted and interrupted sleep they're getting. But then the second thing about
Sorry,
newborn
go ahead.
sleep that people, I think, get wrong is that what they do on day 1 is not the same thing that they're going to be doing on day, 16. It's not going to be the same thing that they're doing at day, 36 or 48. Baby's sleep does get better and it evolves. And we as the caregivers need to anticipate what's coming down the pike and to make adjustments to support their sleep as well as our sleep so that together as a unit we can move forward and evolve in the sleep of ourselves and our newborns.
Yeah. So maybe the misconception is that you'll get any sleep after your baby is born. I think one of the things that surprises me most about working with families is I think when we talk about sleep postpartum, there's this sense that, oh yeah, I know I won't be getting enough sleep, or I know this will be hard. And then when it actually happens, it's confusing and it alarms people. And as a lactation consultant, I'm seeing the people who are worried my baby's waking up so much because they're not getting enough food. But in reality, they're designed to wake up that much in the newborn phase. So I love that you try to prepare people prenatally, because I think that is probably the biggest thing that we can do that can arm people and have people be prepared for this. I also tell families that, I don't know if you found this too, but there's this adrenaline and this shift that happens postpartum where you actually don't mind that you're up every 3 hours for a few weeks at least.
Yeah. I mean, and I think that's the key piece, right? Is that, there was a family I was working with recently. We just finished up our last visit and, dad came into it knowing that like it was going to be hard. It was going to be every 3 hours. He was so prepared. He's like, I don't even need that much sleep anyway. But baby's almost 5 months and they were still waking her up to feed. They were still waking her like every 3-ish hours. They were still expecting that at almost 5 months, she was still supposed to be on this pattern of waking up every 3 hours. And when we finally were able to distill, hey, that's actually not really normal. And she should at this point be able to have longer stretches. Dad kind of had this moment where he felt relief that he was given permission to actually sleep, because after you're waking up every 3 hours for 5 months, like you are so deep in it that like that excitement has kind of worn off and now it's turning into a little bit of resentment. And I feel like that's the piece where, yes, there is a period of time where we are learning ourselves in our new postpartum bodies and relationships, and we are learning our new postpartum babies. And at some point we have to, and providers never tell us this, like when do we get to stop waking them up every 2 hours? When do they get to have longer stretches? At what point are the signs that we get to understand that if our baby's sleeping, we let them keep sleeping? We don't need to intervene as much as our minds might think that we need to intervene.
And most of the time, after that initial newborn phase where your milk is coming in, you're establishing your milk supply, all of those important things are happening. Newborns and babies, they know what they need and
Yes.
they will sleep, and we don't have to get in their way. One of the things that I run into is when a baby is sleeping so well that it is problematic. That, if I see a family in the first 2 days and they're like, I'm sleeping so well, I'm like, oh no, what's going on? So that's an important thing to keep in mind. But I've heard you use the phrase becoming embodied when you talk about babies. Let's talk about that. What does that really mean to you and why does it matter?
Yeah. So I feel like this is kind of where my practice gets a little bit woo. I would have to say that I am definitely a very spiritual person. I definitely believe in something bigger than us. And, in my life experience, I've had so many things happen where, like, for example, you know, I was 16 years old and my choir teacher came into the room. Like all the contacts that we had was like, we were finally going to figure out what our songs were that we were going to be singing for the big recital and all of these things. She comes in so excited and she's like, okay, everybody, guess what? And I said out loud, you're pregnant. And she turned bright red, gasped, turned on here and like ran out of the room. And everybody was like, what, Camilla? And I was like, oh, she was probably going to tell us what we were going to be singing in the recital. And it was just like this moment where I had that like little kid thing where it's like I couldn't stop myself. I couldn't filter myself. And in that moment before I had said anything, I got this beautiful image of this like round faced little like dark haired baby. And it just like came to me because I was like, oh, she's got to know that she's pregnant. And later she came back into the room and she told us like, my husband doesn't even know. I took a pee test this morning. I knew that I was pregnant and you were the only other person who knew. There was no way for you to know. Like, there's no way I'm not even showing like any of the things. And I laughed and I was like, yes, but your baby visited us in that moment when you came in so excited. And I feel like, in my experience, when I conceived my own babies, like they were just like right there and I needed to just go and collect them, and when I work with clients, as they are giving birth, like I sometimes will feel the baby almost like their spirit outside of their mom. And I'll just be like, okay, now you guys have to marry your body and your soul together. And once you kind of do that process, you take your first breath and, all of that, you're going to be in your body. And so when I talk to families a lot about what it means to be embodied with their babies and have their babies be embodied, I really do believe that before we are in our corporal form, we are energetic bodies somewhere in the universe, somewhere, everywhere. Like we are stardust, right? Before we actually come into our physical meat suits. And when I see babies and their parents bonding and doing skin to skin in the early days, I realize that a huge piece of that is like they are understanding what it feels like to be in corporal form. And in order to help babies kind of integrate that experience, you kind of have to give them proprioceptive touch. You have to help them understand that this is my torso. These are my arms. My arms have elbows. My elbows have wrists. I have hands and there are fingers at the end, and these fingers are tools, and I can use these tools to rub my face, to suck on my fingers, to bring that passy that's over there to my mouth, to be able to, do cross-body motion. And when you kind of allow your babies that space and energy to be in their bodies, it makes it so much easier to do all of the things developmentally, but it also makes it so much easier to sleep. And I like to work with families who are willing to kind of go out on this limb with me for a second and be like, how do we help our babies become embodied in their bodies so that they can understand what it means to sleep in different positions, what it means to nurse in different positions, what does it mean to be bottle fed in this position versus this position?
And probably by different people, by
course,
what does it
yeah.
mean to be fed by somebody that's not the person who's breastfeeding you, for example. I
Exactly.
can really speak to this from even just a scientific perspective. When I worked in the NICU, anyone who works with babies knows that they have their personalities when they're born. They're there. However, there are some babies that I worked with where it would be night and day. They were not there yet. They weren't embodied yet. And then they were. And they like arrived in their body. And working with babies who are born prematurely, it's such a magical thing. It feels so magical. But also from it, and you were describing the body parts, like showing them like, this is my shoulder, this is my elbow. And one of the interventions, the scientific proven interventions that we do in the NICU for newborns is deep pressure, because light touch is actually a very complicated pathway, and it's very complex for the brain to process, like light tickling touch for a newborn. However, deep pressure is what they've been feeling the entire time in the uterus. And that deep pressure has the ability to calm their nervous systems, to help with their proprioception, that ability for their brain to know where their body is in space. And of course, would be helpful for them to be able to sleep. So, how do you kind of help families understand that process and then move from that to like, what do you actually do to help with sleep?
Yeah, that's a great question too. Okay, so I can go so many ways with this, but I'll go like the most basic way. So the most basic way is that I hear a lot of people talk about the 4-month sleep regression, the 8-month sleep regression, the 12-month sleep regression, the 18-month sleep regression. And from my view, I'm like, yeah, their sleep does kind of get worse. But why? Why does it get worse? And when we kind of look at, what is happening around 4 months, what's happening around 8 months, what we notice is that around 4 months, babies start to learn how to roll. Around 8 months, babies are starting to learn how to crawl. At 12 months, they're starting to learn how to walk. At 18 months, they are doing everything by themselves and they do not want your help at all. So like they are in this like whole different state of being. But when babies, and I think when everybody, but I see it a lot in babies, and it's very easy to spot in babies, when they're learning a new skill, it's sometimes really frustrating to them. Like it's really hard for them to just chill and relax and like be like, oh yeah, I'm learning this new skill, because they aren't thinking about this skill in that type of way. And so around 4 months, when we are teaching our babies how to crawl or to roll over, we have to teach them how to engage their core, because you can't roll if you have a weak core. You can't
Yes.
get your leg swung over your body if you don't have the core strength to move that. If you can't, figure out the opposite motion for crossbody motion, you can't actually propel yourself over. A lot of times
Yeah.
you'll find babies will, their heads are bigger than the rest of their bodies. If they throw their head one direction, the body will follow. But we don't turn from our necks, right? That's not what that's supposed to be. It really is a core movement that we need to kind of get strong. And around 4 months, as our core gets stronger, like our girdle around our intestines gets stronger, our girdle around our diaphragm gets stronger. So it really does make it easier to do the hard work of learning how to roll, figuring out, proprioceptive, like placement of your body in space. It makes it easier to deal with equilibrium. It makes it easier to, as babies' eyes get better, their hearing gets better, their awareness gets bigger, to kind of figure out like, oh, I heard that sound crinkling over there. If I turn my head and I use my leg, then I'm going to be able to maneuver my body to go check out and investigate whatever it is that I heard over there. And
Yes.
once you kind of get babies to do all of these various different parts, then they're going to be able to physically exhaust themselves in a way that is helpful for sleep. And I liken it a lot to parents about, I would never run a marathon. I will not run around the block unless like I would really have to. But for those of us who do run and who do train for big runs, like you don't just start off day one being like, okay, I'm going to do, 21 miles. Like that's would be crazy. You start off in little bits and spurts. And as you get back into this practice, your body is more tired at the beginning. And then, of course, it is really tired after you're finished, at mile 13 or whatever. But you kind of get into that stride where your body kind of has a little bit more stamina to keep it going. And I think about that and I liken that to what it is when babies learn how to do any of these new physical skills. Is at first their brain has to do a lot of thinking to get their body parts to do a lot of the moving. But
Totally.
eventually, their brain has to do a lot less work to do the physical work. And so their physical work can increase and their stamina increases. And so the two things paired together make it easier to actually sleep, because now we've exhausted the mind and the body. And now our brains and our babies' brains can actually focus on the other pieces of development, which is like once they learn how to roll one way, they get to learn how to reverse it and go back. Once they are able to roll once all the way, then they can keep rolling like a log all the way over to that thing that they've decided that they want to
That's my
reach.
favorite part. It's called rolling for locomotion.
Oh, I love it. Yes.
And then the other thing I was going to say is when that frustration, that in my practice, we call it functional frustration because it's
Mm,
very important to allow your baby to be frustrated and not
yeah.
solve all the problems for them and just flip them into tummy time every single time. My favorite way to help a baby learn to roll is to get them just to the point where they can't quite go anymore on their own and then give them a little bit of help. And it's really about finding that threshold of enough help so that it is hard for them, but they don't
Mhm.
get frustrated to the point where they give up. So
Yeah.
I think, and that it's basically we're talking about working out your baby so they're tired so that they'll sleep at night for you.
Yeah. I mean, and that's like another piece of it, right? Like the science of sleep, there's like a big body of research here, like, right? They have coined it the science of sleep. And one of the things is that they talk about is between the time that your baby wakes up till the first nap of the day, we want to practice language development, math development, and just figuring out how to sequence things in our brain, recognize patterns. And so that's when we employ our parentese, which is that talking when you talk like this to your baby, so that, your baby is starting to learn how language flows and what comes next. And if we go up at the end of our sentence, we're asking them a question rather than if we go down and we're communicating something different versus if we go flat. And so when we work our baby's brains out, we practice math with them. And, what does baby math look like? That means mama's going to get her cup of coffee and then we're going to go to the other room and then we're going to sit down and mama's going to drink her coffee and then we're going to read a book. It's a sequence: first, second, third, fourth. And so we're practicing all of these things. Great time to practice listening to music or podcast or the different language, whatever. Your baby for that first nap is mentally exhausted and able to sleep much deeper than the second chunk of wake window from the time they wake up from their first nap to the time that they go down for their second nap is all about physical exertion and getting their bodies moving so that now their physical body is also tired and has kind of gotten to that deep place of like, I actually can't keep my eyes open because my brain is still recovering and also now my body is recovering. And so then that third nap of the day, after you kind of get to the point of like we're taking 3 or 4 naps a day, is all about combining the two. How do we do movement circles as well as listening to music in the background? And so that last nap is like really the cap nap of the day. Like you cap it at the end. It's maybe 45 minutes long and then it helps them to stretch into overnight sleep.
Wow, that is amazing, Camilla. I feel like so many parents are like, but what do I do with my baby? And having this framework of first wake window is all about language and sequencing, math. Math can be as simple as, look, there are two dogs, you know.
Yeah.
And I remember when my first daughter started talking and we were out walking and she looked across the street and she said, two dogs. And I was like, what,
Oh,
how do you know what two is? And it's just because of all of the language that she had had throughout her life. And I spoke in French to her. I didn't speak in French to any of my other babies, poor people, but I spoke in multiple languages because I had this idea in my mind of, tiring her brain out. And
yeah.
I wish that I had had the idea of sequencing the day like this. It's so beautiful that the first wake window is that math and language development. The second wake window is gross motor, like big movements and floor time, lots of time on the floor. And then the third window is combining everything. I would
Yeah.
be tired.
Yeah. Well, and it's amazing because a lot of times when people reach out to me and they're like, "Oh, we are so busy. We read books, we do this, we do that." And I'm like, "Okay, that's great, but like you do that at every wake window? Like how is it possible that you are really getting your baby to the point of exhaustion?" And then I come to learn after we do some deeper investigation and I like, really lay it out for them. This is what it looks like. They're like, "Oh no, we'll read a book," and then they kind of get bored and then we move on to the next thing. And it's like what you're saying about the functional frustration. It's like you have to kind of push it just enough that like, okay, we're actually done with this activity, but we've pushed it just enough that our capacity is growing, that our frustration has gotten to the point where it's like, okay, we can come pick that back up later.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think there's so much fear and urgency around getting your baby to sleep, especially in this country where we don't have very good paid parental leave and we are unsupported in our return to work in so many ways. Parents are feeling this sense of dread when they think about having to use their brains in a complicated way in their jobs when they have a newborn or even a 3 or 4 month old waking up every few hours. I think especially I hear that languaging around regression as well. And I wish that people would call it a progression because it really actually is, especially between 3 and 4 months. That's the first time that a baby makes their own melatonin. Otherwise, they're getting melatonin from breast milk. And if they're not getting breast milk, they're not getting melatonin. So their brain is developing in this wild way. And it's not a regression. It's a progression of their ability to learn a new skill. But the fact that it's paired usually with a return to work on the parent's part is just not fair. And so I guess, what do you think, what do you tell families who are sort of staring down the barrel of going back to work with a baby who won't sleep very well?
Yeah, I mean, again, this is one of those things. The earlier I get to them, the more times we have opportunities to kind of talk about these things. And so, before I start working with them as postpartum doula, we map out when are we going back to work? So when are we going to be introducing a bottle? When are we going to be introducing passy? When are we going to be introducing a caregiver? When are we going to start practicing all of these things that maybe there isn't actually like a sleep regression? Like we really are just continuing good sleep habits through this period of time so that by the time we go back to work, we've kind of laid everything into this foundation that works really well. But of course, a lot of times I get that phone call from people who are desperate. They're deep in it. They're like, I go back to work next week and our baby's not sleeping. I'm so sleep deprived. What do we do? And I always ask them, like, can you give me 2 weeks? Let's add these things in to see if it makes a difference. And my husband jokes like this is a bad business model that I have because I do the first sleep consultation. It's free. It's a 30-minute conversation. Sometimes it's an hour. And I give them all of these activities and these things to add into their daily lives and to add into their rhythm. And then I never get a call back. And when I reach back out and I'm like, hey, how are things going? They're like, oh, everything's great. Baby started sleeping, da 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 da. And I'm like, oh, that's wonderful. My husband's like, you should charge because you just like gave up a client, right? And I was like, no, because it's so important to me that people are feeling strong and confident in their ability to parent and also go back to work and to juggle this and to balance that. That when I can get a quick fix, an easy fix with just making some slight adjustments, that's worth every single second of my time of like creating this next generation who is able to be parented with more grounded parents who have more patience, who then can go on to have their babies that end up being, parented by regulated, good humans that are like, okay, this is just part of getting to know you. They are more connected, all of the things. But when people are facing these hard timelines of like, hey, I'm going back to work and baby's not sleeping, what do I really need to do? It's often like a time where I do a lot of education for parents around like, how do we tighten up your sleep hygiene? How do we tighten up the bedtime routine? How do we take things out that make it easier to stick to 20 minutes? Okay, we're going to spend an hour and a half putting baby down, but then they're going to be down for 20 minutes. The return on investment is so bad. Why are we doing an hour and a half just to get 20 minutes? Like, let's switch that up. Let's do 20 minutes to get an hour and a half. And the more times that we kind of allow space for parents to actually have stronger, better routines, have a good handoff between like, this parent gets this much sleep and then at this hour they flop, and let's choose it to be around a time where we're doing a feed rather than just an arbitrary time where maybe baby's sleeping, maybe baby's not sleeping, so that there's a moment maybe where 3 people are awake, baby, one parent, and then we're handing baby off and then the next parent gets to soothe them down while the other parent can turn their brain off and go back to sleep. It feels easier and more manageable when you set it up like that, because also most babies will either have longer stretches in the second half of the night or longer stretches in the first half of the night. And so
Yes.
if you know that your baby has a longer stretch in the beginning of the night, then it's easier for the person who's usually nursing that baby or feeding that baby, dependent on their body for that baby, to get that first chunk of sleep than it is for them to be woken up every couple of hours, like at the beginning when they're really exhausted, to then get a longer chunk of sleep in the second half of the night.
If your baby ever needs a pacifier, and not all babies do, the one that I would want in your world is the Ninny. It's the only pacifier designed to actually mimic the shape and function of the breast. It looks like this. It's very soft here, like an areola, and then harder, like a nipple. And this shape means that it supports healthy oral development instead of interfering with it. I really love it because babies don't just passively hold it in their mouth like the ones with the bulb on the end. They have to actively suck. It's hard work. It's my workout pacifier. And that matters for feeding, for regulation, and for long-term oral function. It's especially beautiful for breastfed babies who need a little extra soothing without confusion. If you're listening and you're pregnant, postpartum, or buying for someone you love, you can grab a Ninny through the link in the show notes or use the code BeWellBaby for 10% off at checkout. It's one of these tiny little tools that makes a huge difference. And my favorite part about it is that babies don't get dependent on it. All right, let's get back to the show.
I'm curious. We haven't even said the word sleep training yet, but I'm curious if there is something that you would want families to know before they start Googling sleep training.
Honestly, if I could on my website call it something other than sleep training, I would. But it's the term that people know, and we all kind of have like this idea of what sleep training is. And
Right.
I wish that before parents really started Googling sleep training, they kind of had an idea of what it was that they wanted to get out of the process. And they had a discussion about what their boundaries are around allowing their baby to sleep, around how much parental intervention they want to be doing, around where baby is sleeping and how long they want baby to sleep there. Because a lot of the things that I will come into is that people call me at 6 months and they're like, we need to sleep train our baby. They're co-sleeping in our bed. We never wanted them to co-sleep in our bed. They have a full nursery down the hall and I can't change this. And it was working for a while, but now no one's getting sleep. And now our relationship is hard. Our relationship with our baby is hard. And we don't know where to go next because we also are terrified of just letting our babies cry and to be walking away from a crying baby, but we also don't know how to do this. And so when I talk to those parents, a lot of questions have to come up, right? Which are like, talk to me a little bit more about what is hard about listening to your baby cry. Is it that you don't know what to do, and when they cry, you just have this immediate, like, visceral reaction? That's what happened to me when I heard my babies cry. Like, I was like, oh, it feels like a gut punch. I'm going to throw up. Also, don't touch my baby. Just give me back my baby. That was me. And for other people, it's like, I feel like I'm neglecting them. I feel like I'm emotionally going to scar them. I feel like, they're going to learn that if they cry and I don't come to them, that they should just stop crying out. And then we're going to have a bad relationship when they're like teenagers, or like, I'm not going to be able to meet my grandbabies because like we had all these emotional issues between us. I'm like, oh, wow, that's like big thinking. Like, we can kind of roll it back a little bit. I don't think that's going to happen. But what I'm
That's
hearing
so,
you
I mean,
say,
the catastrophizing is real though, especially in that
so
early
real.
postpartum. And I don't know, I know you have 3 kids as well. I have very different relationship with each of my kids' cries. Like, one of them will cry and I feel like she's probably being tortured. It's the end of the world and I must go to her. And
that your
another one
first?
will cry and yeah.
Yeah.
Camilla, you know. Yes, that was my first. And then another one will cry, and I know she's safe. I know she's okay. And I know that I'll get to her when I have a minute.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh,
And I think that that's like one of the hard parts too, especially for first time parents, is that we are trained by our babies, right? And it's so biological. When we hear our baby cry, we are supposed to go to them. And
right.
especially the first baby, when, same with me, my first baby, like postpartum was really hard. And I was like mama bear from the moment that he was born. And
Yeah.
so even now, he's about to turn 8 next month. When he cries, something in me still is activated to this point
Oh,
where I'm
yeah.
like, did I do the wrong thing? Did I mess him up by feeling so stressed during labor and pregnancy? Did I mess him up by like saying at 9 months, get the fuck out of my bedroom? Like, you cannot sleep in my bed with me anymore. We're going to IKEA right now. We're getting that crib and we are putting you there. Cause that's not how we had imagined, raising our kids. Like, I thought my kids were going to co-sleep with me until they were 5 years old.
Yeah.
I would have been okay with him sleeping in my bed with me until he was 13 if he wanted.
Right.
But the reality didn't play out that way. And then after, like, there's 4 years between my oldest and my next, like, when he came along, I was like, I don't ever want you to leave. Stay in my bed with me forever. And
Yeah.
he looked at us and he was like, nah, dude, this is
That's
not it for me. To the point where we're like, okay, you don't have to sleep in bed with us, but maybe you can sleep at the end of our bed. But there was one night I remember he stood up in his crib. He looks over the crib. My husband is snoring. And I was like in bed scrolling and he is just standing there looking at me like disparagingly, like shaking his head. And I was like, oh, am I disturbing you? Like, I'm so sorry. We ended up moving him out of our room the next night and he slept the whole night through. Like, he's a tourist, so he loves the luxury and like, his own space and all the blankets and I was just like, okay, like I get that it's different, but it is a
incredible.
thing when, people are learning about sleep training and trying to figure out a solution. When they start Googling, they are going to get those Reddit threads that are like, cry it out's going to fuck your baby up forever. They get the thing where it's like taking care of babies. Your baby should have been sleeping by 12 weeks, fully 12 hours by 12 weeks. Like, there are other different things where it's like, we can do this ladder while we, as they escalate, we do more and more intervention. But then we get to the like top rung of the ladder and they're worked up. Parents are worked up and now they don't know how to de-escalate and come back down. If you go in being like, I know for a fact that I don't want to let my baby cry. I really do want to find a gentle method. I really do want to find someone who can actually come to my house to like look it around, to meet my baby, to see how my baby interacts with me. Those things are the things that I wish that people knew and they could prioritize finding someone who could work with them in person, one-on-one, rather than I'm going to buy this sleep plan template from whatever, or I'm going to just, buy into this $300 sleep program where I have all these modules that I am going to go through and then all of a sudden my baby's going to sleep. Like, that's just not how it works. And I really do think that when you have someone who can come over, meet you, be in your space, be like, oh, hey, I'm noticing that, like, yes, it's blacked out, but I see all of this light around the edge of your windows. Or, hey, I'm noticing that you live on a busy street and your baby's crib is on the side of the house that like has the most sound. Maybe we put a sound machine to help deafen that sound a little bit. Or, hey, I'm noticing that your room is actually a little bit too cold for your baby who seems to want to have a warmer room. Like, by having that human piece of it, it makes a huge difference in being able to get your baby to actually sleep. And so my advice is, if you're going to Google, sleep training, Google gentle sleep training, someone local who can come to my house, and then figure out what it looks like to have someone come and do the training at your house with you versus I'm going to come meet you, see the scene, and then we're going to do virtual remote support. Because I think that for some babies, yes, virtual remote support works really great. And other times it's like a baby really does need to feel someone else's energy who has that expertise. I'm calm. I'm not stressed about whether or not you sleep because I'm here. I'm well rested. And if that person can kind of set the scene and kind of help de-escalate a lot of the tension and the like emotion around sleep and the desperation, it makes it easier for babies to be like, oh, this is what we were trying to do. I
And it feels
understand.
good. It feels good.
Yeah.
I get to rest, you know? Yeah, I think that's a really a shift for a lot of babies with stressed out parents. So you describe sleep as a process that we can support rather than a problem, which is exactly what we were just saying, that it's this process and we all do it. We have to do it to be alive. And can you just kind of walk us through what it looks like when you're working with a baby, and maybe also why you would recommend a more gentle approach?
Yeah. Well, I recommend a gentle approach for everybody across the board because I think that when we normalize being slower and pausing for, I don't know, connection, a lot of things will just flow easier. Like there's that saying that's like, we move at the speed of trust. And I think that babies innately want to trust us, right? Like we are their protection. And when we start to feel rattled, our babies pick up on that energy. And so if we can move slowly enough to be like, hey, I am learning how to trust myself so that you can learn how to trust me and so that we can learn to trust each other in this process, it makes it easier for everybody on board and to be like, okay, this is what we're working on. And I think that when we vocalize and say out loud, I often tell parents, say it in your head. Like when your baby first wakes up, the first thing that you do before you rush to them is you take a deep breath and you say in your head, I've got this. They've got this. We're learning together. And when we take that moment to pause and like say this thing inside of our minds, it shifts our perspective on what's going to like transpire, right? And when we go to, I encourage people when they go to set their babies down in the crib, before you move, you pause, you have stillness, and you say, even if it's a little bit out loud like a whisper, I'm going to set you down now. I love you, and I will be back. Then we are kind of giving them that permission to be safe in their bodies and to be safe in their environments and to also have enough wherewithal to know that we are changing something, but everything is still safe and okay. And so when we start to pause and do things a little bit more gently, it does make sense for our bodies to have that nervous system shift where we are able to stay in our deep vagal nerve relaxation state where we all can be together better, faster. And when we do things with this intention, we're learning together. We're doing this as a process. We're figuring out what works for us as a team, as a family unit. It just makes it easier to be like, yeah, we are only as strong as our weakest link. And our weakest link in this moment is the fact that we don't know how to sleep together. And that doesn't necessarily mean like, hey, we're co-sleeping or we're sleeping in the same bed or bed sharing. It's just when you are sleeping and I am sleeping, we need to learn how to do that together. And so what does it look like when I show up to someone's house and we're like talking about sleep? We really do. We go over every single step. I want to know what happens between like 6 p.m. and 8 a.m. Because when I find out like, oh, at 6 p.m. they're getting a little nap, but then they have bedtime, and then bedtime always ends in a big exciting bath, and sometimes the water is colder than other times, and whatever. I'm like, ooh, can we move things around so that maybe we do that bigger stimulating thing first before we kind of down regulate to the point where if we are able to kind of slope into sleep, it makes it easier than if we are going, sleeping really high activity. Now we're trying to go back to sleep and now you're upset. So now we're up here again, and we're sidestepping. We're not going to gently progress into sleep. So we come over, we learn the routine. We talk about like some of the science behind what's happening in their brains, what's happening now in this moment as like a 6-month-old versus what's going to happen when they're 3 years old. And you know this because you have some older children that like, if you read them 15 books when they are 6 months old before bed, by the time that they are 3, now we're reading 45 books before bed and they are negotiating another this. They want some more water. They need another snack. Can you come tuck them back in? And we kind of want to nip that in the bud at the beginning so that we are able to on the days when we have a little bit more capacity, stretch it a little bit. Like, yeah, sure, it feels good to have another, book tonight. Or yeah, let's sing the song 2 more times. Like, that feels good. But if we start to think of it as kind of like a capsule routine where we have little pieces that we can kind of plug in, it just makes it easier to do the whole thing. But
And it sets the expectation for the baby too, that we read 2 books. And when you're less than one, we read 2 very short board books.
yes,
And
yes,
right. And now I have a baby right now who, because my oldest reads, she loves to read to the other kids. And it's nice, but the other kids have now been like, but now you're going to read me books, right? Like, we're going to read 45 books, right?
yeah.
So
And it's
it
so
is
hard.
important to like stick to that routine. And I love what you said about it feels good to stretch that. Like that flexibility, I think is so important in parenting, having limits and having boundaries and being willing to be flexible and push that. And I love having like, this is bedtime, because it helps us work as a team to get there. So it's not like I'm saying we only have time for 2 books because I only feel like reading 2 books. It's that it's almost bedtime. So we've got to get the process going if we're going to get there and have enough time for books.
Yeah. And that's the other thing is that a lot of times parents don't even know where to start when it comes to like, how do we build a routine? And, there are so many tools out there that people can buy into. And there are some that I really like and some that I don't really like. But like one of my favorite tools is the Hatch noise machine nightlight situation. It's a wake to rise. And in our house, when the hatch is red, we stay in bed. And then when it's yellow, it means that it's soon going to be red. And when it turns green, that means green is go. That means that we can get up. The day has started. The noise will turn off at that point, but the light will still be green. So even if my kids were still snoozing, they aren't getting that noise machine, but they have the visual cue of like, oh, it's green. I can get out of bed. And I think that when we are able to, double condition our kids, like, for example, I'll tell parents, like, when your baby's 5 months old, like, have them help put your house to bed. Let's have them turn the light switch off. Let's go around and say, good night, couch, good night, chair, good night, books, all of the things so that we are having them have some buy-in in the process. They are the ones who get to pick those pajamas or those pajamas. Okay, would you like to do the sleep sack before we read the book, or are we going to do the sleep sack after we read the book? So that we are able to kind of give them a little bit of autonomy in it without giving them 100% power, right? Like,
Yeah.
it doesn't matter which pajamas they wear, really. Like, cool, they're in pajamas, that's great. But when we set them up and they have the ability to be like, oh, I get to have this piece of this routine. Now we're doing something together. We're a team, like you said. And so, yeah, I wish
I
that
love,
parents
yeah.
like really, took a little bit of the Rye method, a little bit of the Montessori, a little bit of the Waldorf method so that like we can go really well-rounded people who actually want to participate in the things that the family is doing together, including sleep.
Yeah, I love that. I'll link to some information about some of those methods and approaches, but I always tell, especially when I'm working with students, that there are so many big A approaches. And if you can take everything that you learn from those big A approaches and make it a little a approach under the umbrella of you as a person, then you are going to be this incredibly well-rounded clinician, parent, but that it's very rare that there is one approach where you need to follow every single rule of that one approach and that will work for everything. Every baby and every family are so different, and giving us the permission to take the pieces that work and leave the rest is gold. So thank you for that, Camilla. I love
Yeah.
it.
Well, and it's also really interesting. Like right before we got on this call, one of my moms that I'm working with right now, she has twins. They're fraternal twins. One of them is a great sleeper. The other one is a little bit wily. And she just sent a thing saying like, hey, we're struggling a little bit over here because the little one who's like pretty wily is like waking up more frequently now than before. And I was like, I think that we're going to have to re-explore this idea that they're twins, but they're really just siblings. They're fraternal, you know? And so maybe we do have to split them up so that the one who's really good at sleeping and doesn't have very many sleep problems actually gets that opportunity to keep sleeping and isn't getting woken up by her sister. And then the little one who needs a little bit more support is the one who's sleeping in the same room as the parents, who can easily reach over and do all of the things and, you know, isn't going to wake up the whole house, just the majority of the house, but not the other baby that also is going to need a full parent to like be with. And it's just like one of those things where it's like, I love it when parents have this grounded approach of like, my kid isn't always going to be a baby. And like you said, they come in with their full personality. And sometimes we need to tailor what it is that we know and what we think to actually match where our kid is currently and anticipate where they're going to be in a couple of weeks. Because when we have enough space to kind of do that, everything in parenting gets easier, but especially sleep.
Yeah. I think there are different, quizzes that you can take about your baby's temperament, and their temperament doesn't really change all that much throughout their lives. They just kind of are the humans that they are. And some babies will respond unbelievably well to being left to cry. I've never had a personal baby who has just played in their crib when they wake up. I've had friends who are like, oh yeah, my kid just wakes up and just sort of talks to themselves in their crib for an hour before I get out of bed. And I'm like, what's that like?
It's lovely. It's really lovely, I have to say.
Gosh. But also, some of those kids are the kids who, like, you leave them to cry, they cry once, and then they figured it out. They know how to fall asleep on their own. And just because that isn't your kid doesn't mean that there's anything wrong. I think it's really easy to blame yourself or think, oh, I went in too quickly and I ruined everything. And what's true is that there are babies who that does not work for. And there are lots and lots of babies who that does not work for.
Yeah. I mean, and I have to say, I mean, you worked with preemies, so you know that preemies tend to have a little bit more hypersensitivity. And so when I work with families who had NICU stays, or babies that were just born early for whatever reason, and maybe they didn't actually have to stay at the NICU, like those babies are just a little bit more high strung. And I often work with a lot of those babies in like the sleep space because their parents are like, I don't know why they're like so wired and awake. Like their eyes are always awake. Even when they are being quiet, their eyes are like saucers. And I'm like, yeah, but let's think about it. They went from a very tight, cozy spot to this cold, bright room. And they are still recovering from that. Like, how do we help to like calm their nervous system down enough that they actually feel safe, secure, so they don't have to be on hypervigilance for themselves. Like they are able to trust that you as a parent are going to help them in this way. And when I work with these families, I feel so bad because they're like, is our kid always going to be like this? And I'm like, well, not really, but kind of, because like that's just how they came into this world, and that's okay. Like they might be chill, but they also might be very observant. And so they might have a lot of things that they're thinking about and lots of observations that they want to talk to you about later in life. And that's okay. But you as a parent have to know, like, you just have to change maybe your expectations of what it would have been like to parent a different type of baby, because we all want that simple, chill, easy baby that sleeps 12 hours from day one. But how many of us really get that?
Like
Very rarely.
1 in a million.
Yeah.
I think too, when you have those hypervigilant babies, parents sometimes will blame themselves or blame the NICU stay and things like that. But it's just so impossible to find one thing,
Yeah.
Really, it's the It's the being born early and placed in gravity. Their bodies are extended when they should be flexed. And that leads to a sensory system that's going into overdrive. And the sounds and the lights are so different. And they're hearing them in a different way than they should be, if they were born prematurely. So I think that just keeping in mind that there's so much grief, I feel like, around postpartum, and especially if you have spent any time in the NICU, that you're sort of grieving that initial meeting of your baby, and really just taking time to hold that for yourself, do lots and lots of skin to skin. And that's like one of the best things for your baby's state regulation and their nervous system regulation.
You might already have one of these, but if you don't, I have to tell you about the Aura Ring. I started using it postpartum with my second baby so I could actually see how poor my sleep quality was. It tracks heart rate variability, your sleep, your recovery, your activity level, even subtle shifts in body temperature before you notice them yourself. I really loved watching my stats change throughout my third pregnancy and then improve postpartum. And honestly, one of my favorite things is that it gives me permission to rest. As someone who struggles to slow down, that is everything. So click the link in the show notes for 10% off an Aura Ring. Or if you already have one, grab one for your partner or for your parents. They deserve rest too.
We have talked a lot about nervous system regulation. Do you want to just kind of give a brief overview of what we mean when we're talking about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, specifically in the context of sleep, when we are able to, like I said before, like slow down, do deep breathing, allow ourselves to kind of be in this state of rest and digest, like everything starts to get quiet. There's a space in our minds where our thoughts kind of get longer and slower, and we are actually able to like really be more present because we're able to like, regulate our heartbeat. We're able to engage our diaphragm. We're able to stop breathing out of our chest and breathe into our bellies. We're able to match our heartbeat with our baby's heartbeat if we're doing skin to skin or even holding our baby. And if we were the one who gestated that tiny human, them hearing our heartbeat slow down helps their heartbeat slow down to the point where we are actually syncing up in a way that's more similar to like if they were still in utero. And the fourth trimester is all about that final bit of gestating, right? We give birth when we give birth because if we went all the way to a year of gestating, like our babies would not fit through our pelvises. And so like their big brains, their big skulls, like it would be a disaster. And so we give birth a little early, but our babies aren't done gestating. And so in that process, we are helping our babies learn how to integrate the world around us, which is why, there's that first 40 days that people like practice in the postpartum period where, we ask parents to like stay as cozy as they possibly can. If you can avoid leaving the house, please avoid leaving the house so that you can really focus on finishing that brain development for your baby. But it also develops your brain too as a parent and helps you to down regulate and to relax into parenthood. Although it is hard to fully relax into because we, like you said at the beginning, we've lost so much of our support system. We're thinking about going back to work. Finances are an issue for a lot of families that you've got to balance. Like, am I going to have support today or tomorrow? Like, am I getting a doula? Am I going to have my mother-in-law come? Is that even a relaxing thing to have friends come over and support us? And the more things that we can kind of do to support the parents into being able to stay as calm and relaxed as they possibly can helps our baby stay calm and relaxed as they possibly can. And, one of the other things that I feel like is a really huge piece for the 4-month sleep regression is helping our babies understand self-soothing. And, what does that look like as a 4-month-old? That could be, hey, I found my hands. I know my hands have this thing. I want to suck on my hands. Hey, I know that these fingers can grab things and bring things to my mouth, so I'm using a passy. It also is like figuring out when they wiggle their head side to side really rapidly, like they would if they were trying to go in for the breast, they are rubbing on their vagal nerve and it's calming their bodies down. They also will do that on your chest if they are just snuggling up onto you, onto your shoulder, onto, the bassinet. If they kind of get to their side, you'll see them rubbing their face with their hands. They'll rub their eyes. All of these things are self-soothing. Same thing with tapping. Sometimes babies will tap, tap, tap their arms, or they'll whale tail and slam their feet down like on their crib. All of these things are ways for their body to kind of soothe their nervous system so that they are able to kind of get into a deeper state of rest and digest. Of course, some of these things, like, hey, I have my hand, I just put the passy in, but also I just kicked the passy back out with my fingers because I am not fully in control of myself.
Yeah.
Like, end up causing a little bit of stress. The whale tailing, like they were chill and relax, and now all of a sudden they've woken themselves up because now they're playing because that is fun.
I love that one. That one is one that I explain to parents all the time, is that if babies don't do that, they are missing out on creating bone density in their calcaneus, in their heel, so that their heels are super skinny little tiny heels. And when they do that, because it slams down, and most parents are like, dude, does that hurt? And the point is that they are creating this really, really high impact on their heels, so that when usually happens around 5 months old, so that when they are ready for standing and walking, their heels are ready for that.
Oh,
so it's just like
I didn't know that, and that's
thing.
Great.
I didn't know it as a self-soothing skill, so I love it. So cool.
I can't
also
wait to share that.
The rooting, when babies are like rooting with their mouth open and you're like, it's right there, and it seems like they can't find the breast. I always think of that as they're potentially getting stuck in a reflex loop. So if they're rooting, but their like head isn't against anything, and it's almost like they have the reflex elicited by touching the cheek, and then they can't get out of it to find and coordinate around the breast. So for that, I just like slip in a pinky or a passy, whatever you're using, to get them to start sucking, because that can coordinate the movement for them. So
I love
anyway,
that too. Okay. The more you know.
So, okay, I know we've talked about a ton today, but if someone listening to this is already, like in tears, in the heat of sleep training, huge rabbit hole, has tried the online courses, and they're already just feeling guilty about ever letting their baby cry, whatever they've tried, what would you tell them? What would be a good first step for them?
Call me. Let's talk.
Call Camilla.
Yeah, please call me. And I say this kind of tongue in cheek, but I also am very serious. I offer a free consultation, and a lot of times when we have those consultations, there's a lot of dispelling of myths. It's a lot of normalizing. This is actually a normal thing, and let's reframe this, because there's a lot of information out there that just isn't the best information for every single person. And when someone's telling you you're doing it wrong because your baby's not sleeping, or if you had been doing it right, then your baby would already be sleeping. It's really hard to have any kind of buy-in to make any kind of change, and you get into this point of being paralyzed. Well, I know that this little thing is kind of working, but it also can be the thing that actually is your stumbling block. And so by having an outside perspective who's able to work with you directly one-on-one, it makes it easier for you to actually kind of come out of that pity hole and that fear hole, that grief hole, that guilty hole, and be able to say, oh, actually, we actually can put a new light on this and try this differently. But if you're not going to call me, because I know that it's hard to pick up the phone and actually commit to making a change and to doing things different and to hearing another perspective when you're already so tired, I would love for you to just take a deep breath and remember that this is a really short period of time. And sometimes by holding the boundary for yourself, you actually are doing the best that you can do for everybody else in your family. And what does that boundary look like? It looks different for everybody, but babies don't have words for us, right? And so when they are crying, you have to remember they're trying to communicate that something is not right, that they are trying to share with you, hey, I actually have the cheat code, but I can't translate it into English or whatever your native language is because I don't have those skills yet. And sitting there and just listening to your baby, not necessarily listening to them cry, but really trying to tune in and hear what is it that they're trying to communicate with me can actually make a really big difference. And like, okay, they're crying a lot at this period in our routine. Maybe that part of our routine actually might need to change. Maybe that's the sticking point that's like actually setting us down the path that's leading to more tears and frustration for everybody, when really maybe they're just trying to communicate like I'm ready to go to bed sooner than I've been going to bed. And by maybe adjusting everything up makes the difference because now they're actually able to sleep when they're actually ready to sleep.
Wow, that's amazing. I have, for my third baby, she's a pretty early talker, and it has actually helped so much in sleep because the other night I was putting her to bed and I put her in her crib and she started kind of fussing, and I said, "What do you need?" And she said, will you tickle my back and rub my feet and tell me a story?"
Oh,
I know. Cutest, right? And I was
so
like,
cute.
of course, I will do all of those things. And then I will leave and you will go to sleep.
Yeah.
3 things. And that's the counting. That's the anticipating. And the reason she asked for those 3 things is that I was out of town for a few nights and her dad was doing that every single night, the 3 things. And it was she loved the routine. She enjoyed it. And she was like, "I don't know what you've been doing, but now that you're here, can you do these 3 things that Papa's been doing?" So
I love it. I love
yeah,
it.
sweet.
Like our babies want to love and communicate with us so badly, and it's so hard when we are not able to understand what it is that they need. And so when they
Yeah.
get to that point of being able to communicate with such clarity, you're just like, wow, if only we could have done that from the beginning.
I
Makes it
know.
so
I
much
know.
easier.
It's one of the reasons that I love baby sign language so much, like teaching your babies ASL, because it can make a huge difference early on.
Yeah.
Anyway, that is besides the point. Before we wrap up, I really want you to talk about what you do with search and rescue, because I think that a lot of people, especially people who are pregnant and kind of wondering what to do with their placenta specifically, might be really interested to hear about.
Yeah. So I collect placentas and teeth and bone fragments and ashes for search and rescue. It started off as a program where I was just collecting placentas so that we could train search and rescue puppies. And the reason I started this is that in 2017, one of my childhood friends was in like a rock slide avalanche type thing when she was hiking with her her boyfriend who was going to be her fiance, and like all of the things they were going to like start the most beautiful, most epic, most positive life ever. Like Carly, she was just like the most radiant, most beautiful human being that I've ever met. It's like that person that walks into the room and everybody turns their head and is just instantly put at ease. They feel excited. When she smiles, it's just like your whole world lit up. And she just had that like magnetic energy, and her partner was very similar. Like they would feed off of each other, and it was just like so much beautiful kinetic energy. And they went up to see like the solar eclipse, and they got stuck, and there was a rock slide, and they got trapped up there. When it all happened, the pass in order to get up to them was blocked, that humans couldn't get up there. And they didn't have search and rescue puppies that were trained to be able to get to her. And they would have been able to fly a helicopter in and airlift her out if they had been able to put the GPS on the puppy's collar, get them to where she was, because she didn't die right away. She was alive for a couple of days before she perished. And when we all found out that she was missing, and their hands were tied, they couldn't get to her in time. I was heartbroken because I was like, there's got to be a better way. There's got to be a better way. And one of the things that we learned was just that they didn't have enough puppies who had this skill to be able to do this. And I thought to myself, well, how do we teach these puppies the skill? We need to learn how to do that. And how can I be a part of the solution of getting more people the things that they need in order to be able to teach their dogs how to do this?
Yeah.
And one of my son's best friend's moms was in search and rescue, and she was mentioning that she had donated her placenta to search and rescue. And I was like, tell me more. What does that
I
mean?
have
What does
access
that
to
look
lots
like?
of placentas.
Yeah, I have so many placentas. You just let me know. And she told me that what they do is they take the placenta and they will bury it for months. They will waterlog it. They will burn it. They will, do whatever they do when, people do weird stuff to bodies after they've done horrific things to them. Or people will, like in Carly's situation, they will get stuck or they will get lost in the forest or whatever. And once they have had the placenta in this place for a long enough time, that they will teach the puppies on how to find and locate the human remains. And sometimes it is really just human remains, but other times it is actually a live living person. And I was like, oh, I have hundreds of placentas that I could get you every single month. You just tell me no. She connected me with a woman named Mariah, and Mariah has been like the puppy trainer here in Oregon. She's pretty famous and she does like really amazing work. And every single month we meet up and I give her hundreds of placentas so that, she can train as many dogs as possible. And it's gotten to be this thing that's so big that I often get inquiries from people on the East Coast being like, can we send you our placentas? And I'm like, please don't send me your placentas. How about you send your placentas to your search and rescue and start a program with them? And if they want to learn, they can send their head search and rescue people and maybe bring one of their dogs with them to learn from Mariah here in Oregon. But since we started, it's just become a bigger and bigger thing where now hospitals are mentioning us as like a possibility for people to do with their placenta. And it just makes such a big difference. And, back in 2021, one of my other friends decided to end his life, and I live right in like Forest Park, like the Wildwood Trail is like right outside of my house. And one day we were driving past the Hoyt Arboretum and there was search and rescue dogs and all of these things. And we didn't put two and two together at the time, but my friend Mark had been missing for a couple days. We knew it. We were like trying to figure out like, how are we going to like figure out where his last whereabouts are, all of these things. And I saw, Ariel is her name. She's my son's best friend's mom. And I saw her truck and I was like, oh, that's interesting. I wonder if she's doing, a search and rescue thing. Did not put it together. A month later, I ran into her and I was like, oh, I saw your truck, blah, blah, blah. Like, how did that go? And she was like, oh, well, we found the young man. And I was like, wait, you found my friend? Like, that's so crazy. And she was like, yeah. And she was like, but, the coolest part was, Camilla, is that the pup that found him was one of our first puppies that was trained fully through the placenta program. And I was like, Ariel, what you don't understand about this is that another one of my friends was deeply affected by this program that we started, you introduced me to this idea. And Mark's mom was able to bring him home and like have dignity in recovering his body because one day she randomly just told me like, I donated a placenta to search and rescue. And here it was like a full circle moment of like, she was able to be there to support this family who I deeply love. And I was able to be there for that family because of the placenta that I was able to like donate to like start this whole thing. And so it was just really beautiful. And
That's wild.
Yeah, it's really crazy, but I'm like so proud to have like been able to do this. And, my kids are so excited about it because they are saving, my oldest is the only one who has loose teeth, but he's saving all of his, loose teeth to donate to search and rescue because he, believes in the mission of like what it is that we're doing and trying to helping to find other family members and reunite families. And yeah, it's pretty special. And if you are out there and you have a placenta that you'd like to donate, we've accepted placentas that are 27 years old that were able to be donated. And if you are planning on having a baby and you're not sure what to do, please donate your placenta. I will gladly take it and we can teach more puppies.
Camilla, thank you so much for sharing that. I'm so sorry about Carly. And but I know that like, gosh, the work that you're doing is amazing. And
Yeah.
I'm so honored to be able to share it with the world. And
Thank you.
yeah, and thank you again so much for talking to me today. This was one of my favorite conversations. And I'm crying.
Oh, well, I also have to say that my daughter was born on Carly's birthday, and that to me was like just one of those signs where Carly was just kind of giving me a hug and being like, I see you.
Yeah. Oh, that's incredible.
Yeah.
Oh, Camilla. All right.
Well, Emily, thank you so much for the conversation.
Thank you again. Bye.
Bye.
I really hope this conversation gave you some practical tools and maybe even a little hope if you're in the thick of sleep struggles right now. Camilla's main message that sleep is a process we support rather than a problem we solve really, really stays with me. And if you're sitting there thinking, I need more help than this podcast can give me, I need to sleep, remember that Camilla offers 30-minute consultations. And sometimes that one conversation is all it takes to shift everything. If you have a placenta coming your way, or you know someone who does, consider donating it to Search and Rescue. If you're listening in a part of the country that doesn't have a program like this, consider talking to the right people to get one started. What an incredible legacy to leave. New episodes drop every Wednesday, and you can find us wherever you get your podcasts. Follow me on Instagram at BeWellBabyPDX, or just visit BeWellBaby.org. Send an episode to someone who's pregnant, postpartum, or just needs guidance. No one should have to do this alone. Welcome to the Be Well Baby podcast. You're in the right place.